Hello everybody, thanks for joining me today for this webinar on the SIMATIC Unified HMI basic panels. We'll have a look at some of the features and functions of this latest generation of HMI released by Siemens, and compare them a little bit against the second generation panels which have been in circulation for the last little while. Right, getting straight into it, there's some increased performance and system limits which we'll have a look at extensively going forward in this webinar. Some of the things mentioned here on the left hand side we'll have a look at in more detail, but things like smooth operation and multi-touch, some design changes in, for instance, the graphics, the functionality and controls, window technology, and some of the object or dynamization of objects, and just mention that scripting is available with JavaScript on these latest panels. The visualization, I think, really of the older panels versus the newer panels. Again, similarly, there's four different sizes. They'll all remain fairly the same, or the same in terms of the size, except for one of them, which we'll have a look at now. The biggest difference, I think, there is that the old panel was a key touch panel. In other words, there were some keys available at the bottom of the panel, whereas going forward, the Unified HMI basic panels won't include any keys. It will be purely a touchscreen. So like I said, there's four different sizes. There's a 4-inch, a 7-inch, a 10.1 inch and a 12.1 inch size. Some of the resolutions we'll have a look at in more detail going forward. These are called the MTP panels, being multi-touch panels rather than KTP or key touch panels, which they'll ultimately replace. The firmware images are available for download at the Siemens Industry online support pages, which you can find fairly easily by doing a quick Google search. Right, some of the display information. Just to note, this display information is all correct at the time of recording this. However, it could change going forward depending on if there was a change of supplier for these panels. So the resolutions for the two smaller panels being 800 by 480, for the two larger panels being 1280 by 800. The diagonal sizes, 4.3 inch for the 4-inch panel, 7 inches for the 7-inch panel, 10.1 inches for the 10-inch panel, and 12.1 inches for the 12-inch panel. Points per inch ranging from 125 to 217 points per inch from the biggest to the smallest panel. Aspect ratios of 15 by 9 and 16 by 10. Viewing angles of around about 150 degrees. And importantly, a minimum of 20,000 hours mean time between failure value. So an extensive number of hours before any failures may be expected. The resolution and installation compatibility. So the resolutions, the same for the smaller panels. The 4-inch, the 7-inch panel has the same resolution. The 4-inch is slightly better at 800 by 480, the same as a 7-inch panel. And the larger panels both have a 1280 by 800 resolution. The 9-inch panel is replaced by a 10-inch panel or 10.1 inch panel, and this obviously means that the cutout would need to be enlarged if you plan on replacing the 9-inch panel with a unified basic. So take note of that, just a small change that would be needed for that particular panel. Some of the performance statistics or performance values. This is basically increasing the quantity structure compared to the second generation panel. JavaScripting is available there. We'll talk about that quickly, and higher resolutions. I've taken you through the resolutions. Two of them are the same. Two of them have a slightly increased resolution. PLC connections are up from 4 to 8 connections, so double the amount of connections. That's a significant increase. Tags up from 800 to 1,000 connections. Tags, sorry. The alarms up from 430 alarms to 2,100 100 alarms, so that's significantly increased. Archives from 2 to 10, again a significant increase. Tags from 10 to 50, logging tags, from 10 up to 50, and then scripting is available with Java scripting. So 50 scripts that you can use on the unified panels. Trends exactly the same at 35 trends, and trends per control up from 4 to 5. Text and graphics lists exactly the same, so 300 text lists and 100 graphics lists. Objects per image in your pictures is 600, and the tags per image up from 100 to 300 tags per image. So a really good increase in some of the performance values for the unified panels. Even Java scripting that wasn't available now available. So completely new function available there. Some user friendliness, thanks to the multi-touch gestures. These are really going to be comparable to your consumer devices. So it'll be very similar to using something like your smartphone or your tablet. Very similar to using something like a tablet. It'll have robust tempered glass in the front for a little bit more protection. Operation with gloves, there'll be a number of different gloves. I think it's 6 different types of gloves that you'd be able to use with these panels. There's a glass front which provides some anti-reflective possibilities or compatibilities. The word escapes me there. Which obviously gives you a much better display and better legibility for your graphics and texts. There'll be some detection of errors, and this will be things like maybe touching the screen with the ball of your hand while you pinching it with 2 fingers, for instance. This would obviously assist, if you're touching one graphic, you may not want to touch another button at the same time. Stopping a motor or increasing the speed of a motor by accident could be an issue. So this will detect that error and prevent it. And then there's some high electromagnetic compatibility as well. So some EMC benefits. Zooming is obviously possible thanks to multi-touch gestures. So you can obviously pinch the screen and zoom it if you need to. Some web control extras or web control functionality, and some document display is also going to be easier on these panels compared to the old ones. And I think scrolling is a large part of that. So if you are looking at a document and you need to possibly scroll through that document, it'll be available or easier nowadays. Notification display and text lists would obviously, be a lot easier to scroll through. And then of course the 2-hand operation, like I've mentioned. So I think in a lot of cases it might not be 2 hands, maybe 2 fingers. But if that's the way you want to use them, you can use 2 hands as well. Some of the gloves I've mentioned, there's 6 different types of gloves. I won't mention them all, or I won't name them all, but there are 6 different types, and they'll all give you the standard touch application. Some of the complex touch application, like the zooming, would only be usable by the UVEX Phonomic, the UVEX Rugby Paw, and the C500 and C300 foam gloves. But in general, all these different types of gloves will be able to be used with the unified basic panel. Some of the connectivity options, there's going to be the 1 Ethernet port, which would obviously give you Ethernet capability or compatibility. 2 USB 2 ports for any USB devices you might want to plug in there, and a reset button for placing the device in a reset mode if that's something that you need to do. Connectivity options via the Ethernet interface. So I think communication or communication functions being S7 and S7 Plus communication. That would obviously be for communication between S7 devices. Profinet basic services like assigning names and IP addresses, or Profinet names and IP addresses. would be available over that Ethernet interface. I think that's as usual. And project downloads if you need to. So on the right hand side there, project download and firmware updates above your Ethernet interface. Network access to your control network. It's just access to the PLC, of course, and integrated third-party PLC access. So we'd be able to communicate with third-party devices if you need to. There is a web page available for or describing this, which can be found at the Siemens Industry Online Support ID that's noted there. Control panel, going forward this will be, I think, the standard way that you use this, and that'll be access to the control panel rather than the operating system. And this adds a layer of security, meaning that, mostly you wouldn't be able to access the operating system, the base operating system being, I think, Windows 10 IoT. There'll be a control panel that sits above that, and that would be able to be accessed. And of course the runtime as well. So again, it adds a layer of security, which going forward is necessary. Some remote control options. There'll be one client that's included, or one operating client that's included in these panels going forward that's not extendable, so it'll just be the one client that's available. What this essentially does is give you asynchronous access to the panel via, again, your consumer devices. In a lot of cases it would be your smartphone or your tablet if that's what you've set up, as long as this function is configured and usable, then you'd be able to access the HMI from wherever you might be. If you're not directly at the HMI, then you could operate any of the functions via these consumer devices, which is something that I think the unified panel range will offer. Whether it's the basic panels or the comfort panels, this would always be something that's usable going forward. Some other security features. Security is obviously a bigger topic nowadays when the world is becoming a little bit more connected nowadays, I think, and adding layers of security to your devices is necessary nowadays. So, like I've mentioned, the control panel is going to be accessible mainly from the panel rather than the operating system, which is one layer of security. Some of the other layers of security, or some of the other security functions, would be the disabling of your interfaces. I think in a lot of cases they might remain enabled, but if you wanted to disable them, you can. These functions are available via the control panel in most cases. So the USB, the Ethernet or Profinet interface, and the SNMP and transfer functions would all be able to be enabled or disabled via the control panel. You can use a runtime function to enable the Ethernet interface if that's what you, or if that's how you want to do it. Some of the security updates, so firmware updates that you can make via TIA portal or the SIMATIC automation tool would always keep your device up to date with the latest firmware updates and therefore the latest security updates. And then of course the basic layer of security, or the basic type of security, would be your username and password access, and that would mean that only people with the correct level of access would be able to access certain functions on the HMI, and that's obviously highly configurable via the TIA portal. Some accessories that are available, so you have some input tools, for instance the touch pens, two different types of touch pens, and importantly a stainless steel touch pen. A stainless steel touch pen would be particularly useful in hygienic spaces like the food and beverage industry or the pharma industry. Some devices and cables, basic things like keyboards and mouses, although there is a stainless steel keyboard that's available, and that would be mainly for vandal protection. So in areas that may be susceptible to vandalism. You can use these keyboards, but the stainless steel keyboard is available or is usable as a standard keyboard if you need to. And then of course the protective film. So the protective film is something that you can replace, whenever you need to. This would prevent largely scratching on the actual screen. This can be a problem as time goes on, so protecting scratches would be possible via this protective film, and just change the film as and when you need to. It'll obviously help with reflectiveness. Depending on the lighting conditions where these things are installed, it will, prevent reflective light, which can obviously help with your display or your legibility. Shatter protection, it may be that something flies into the panel from the plant somewhere along the line and shatters the screen. With the protective film, that would be largely negated. There's obviously an easy installation and replacement of these things, and it can also assist with bacteria that might build up on the display. So the new generation of panels will have some device replacement concepts or assistance. At the bottom there you can see there's a Modernize Now web page, which you can access. If you were to do a quick Google on modernizing your HMI panels with Siemens from second generation to unified panels, you'll find a modernization landing page there, which will guide you on how to modernize the solution or upgrade the solution if you need to. There'd be, again, like I said, guides on doing that, and a data to unified TIA portal add-in, which would help you to, for instance, transfer bulk data like your tags. Most of these things have an industry online support page link, and in a lot of cases you can just Google that and it'll come up very easily, very quickly. A couple of installation or mounting options. In general, it's panels are mounted in landscape, but if you do need to mount it in portrait, that is something that you can do and orientate it or set the orientation to portrait. There's a couple of different mounting angles if you need to tilt the panel at all, and then a one-man mounting system via some spring clamps and mounting brackets, which would make mounting these panels a lot easier, and it would enable sort of one person to mount this quickly and easily. Some of the dimensions, we've mentioned some of the basic dimensions. The cutouts, like I've mentioned, would remain largely the same, except for the 9-inch and 10-inch versions where it would have to be enlarged slightly. The depths on the panels would be slightly different, but nothing that's too serious. And of course the front sizes would change very slightly as well. So all of these things are very similar from the old generation or the second generation of panels, and therefore changing out the second generation for a unified basic panel would be fairly simple. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me, guys.